Chapter 175. Li Qingshan and the others were indeed facing this problem. The boat was anchored on the water. The cavern before them was no longer a single path. Instead, it had split into three. Every single path seemed similar, pitch black and deep. Who knew where they led to? Splitting up was obviously impossible. Who knew how many more forks there would be if they ventured deeper? They would definitely outnumber them. What do we do? Li Qingshan gained a better understanding of why the Hawkwolf Guard had failed to finish off the zombie Daoist. He even doubted whether he could do it. The most difficult part was not fighting, but searching. Hao Pingyang smiled complacently. Would I have come down here if I wasn't prepared? I knew these guys were unreliable, so I considered the worst-case scenario. As he said that, he fished out a wooden sphere that resembled a rugby ball from his 100 treasures pouch. Afterwards, he turned the mechanism at the top, and with a series of creaks, many tiny holes appeared on the sphere. It was like a beehive. With a buzz, a swarm of tiny insects flew out of the beehive, but they were not bees. Instead, they glowed like fireflies. Little N's eyes lit up again. He extended his hand and grabbed one, only to discover that it was not a real insect. Instead, it was an extremely intricate mechanical insect. There was a green gem on its tail, and every single one of them seemed like a fine piece of art. Li Qingshan asked, "What are these?" Hao Pingyang said, "You'll know once you see." Under his control, the swarm of insects split into three groups and flew into the three caverns. Hao Pingyang then turned the top of the beehive, and the tip shone with green light, forming a ball in the air. There was a huge speck of light and countless smaller specks of light in the ball of light. The tiny specks of light split into three groups, all starting with the huge speck of light. They left behind three twisting paths in the ball of light. At a closer glance, they were three caverns of different shapes. They actually formed a three-dimensional map in the ball of light. Li Qingshan immediately understood their use. He praised the wonders of Mahi's techniques once again. Afterwards, the specks of light began to split up, leaving behind even more paths and creating an even more detailed map. Hao Pingyang said, "I found it in the storehouse. It's a puppet specially used for searching and drawing. Everyone, rest up and catch your breath. Once we find the zombie Daoist nest, we'll set off." Senior brother is wise indeed. Jin Bao praised. Everyone sat down, took some pills, and harmonized their auras. Hao Pingyang, on the other hand, focused on controlling the puppet insects. After a while, a mechanical insect probed out of a cave that had traces of human carvings. Then, the mechanical insect was destroyed by something and lost all sense of it. Annoying bugs. A withered hand crushed the insect. The zombie Daoist rubbed the stone coffin beside him like he was touching the face of his lover. "Don't fret. There'll be fresh blood very soon. It'll all be the blood of Qi practitioners." Li Qingshan pointed at the ball of light. "Looks like it's here." Zhang Lanqing and the others also revealed excited expressions. The goal of this trip was right in front of them. Hao Pingyang said, "Once we summon the mechanical insects back, we'll set off." When the last mechanical bug returned to the beehive-like wooden sphere, Hao Pingyang got up. He was just about to give the order to set out, but he suddenly frowned and looked towards the cave behind him. Li Qingshan said, "Looks like I can only send you here." At the end of the day, he still had to deal with his own matters. After clashing with Zhuozhibua twice, he could not do it a third time. It was time to put an end to it. Zhang Lanqing said, "What?" Afterwards, he sensed the powerful aura from the cave, as well as the sharp killing intent. His heart skipped a beat. Heisher and the other two sensed the determination to kill, and their expressions changed as well. They could not help but look at Li Qingshan. Although they had spent most of their time studying the arts of engineering in the 100 schools of thought, they were not naive youths. They knew very well what it meant to be caught in the crossfire. If the Black Hawk commander had truly made up his mind to attack, he probably would not care about them at all. Instead, he would try to silence them. Hao Pingyang immediately said, "Let's set off right now." "Want to set sail?" Li Qingshan shook his head gently. "No, the ship won't be able to shake them off with its speed. This has nothing to do with you in the first place. Go first." Once I shake them off, I'll catch up and rendezvous with you very soon. Qingshan's right. A single person is still a little smaller. The cave is so complicated, so we might not be able to find him. If we flee together, we might be pincered from both sides. Senior brother, hurry up and make up your mind. He sure could not help but say. He did not want to become enemies with the Black Wolf commander over a kid he had just met. Not only would there be no benefits, but it would even lead to life-threatening danger. The zombie Daoist had lost the submerged shadow sword, and his ambush had been destroyed. He was extremely weak now. Even without Li Qingshan, they were confident they could take him down. As for the even darker thought in his head, he did not even bother to think about it carefully. If Li Qingshan was gone, then there was no need to split the 30%. Hao Pingyang said, "Then let's fight." However, apart from Zhang Lanqing, who stood up nervously, no one else responded. The aura grew closer and closer. Jin Bao said, "Qingshan, you can leave Little and here for now. We'll take good care of her." Little and wielded 2,000 mechanism crossbows. She was extremely powerful, and she did not need to split the loot either. Of course, he would never admit he had such thoughts. "How can you do this? Didn't we say we were in the same boat? If it weren't for Qingshan, we would have died in the morgue," Zhang Lanqing could not help but say. Zhang Lanqing could not help but ask. Li Qingshan was his savior, so how could he be ungrateful? He Isher grumbled, "My life has never been saved." He was a noble disciple of the Mahis school. He would definitely accomplish great things in the future, so how could he risk his life? Zhang Lanqing pointed at Heisher, speechless. No matter how he looked at it, Heisher and the others would be doomed if Li Qingshan killed him. Jin Yuan lowered his head and grumbled slightly, "Senior brother Zhang, you're a 5th-layer Qi practitioner. We're not that powerful. Even if we stay, we'll just be more of a hindrance. You're strong, so of course you're confident. We're weak, so it'll be very easy for us to be killed. You 3 idiots." Hao Pingyang was extremely disappointed in his 3 junior brothers. Not only was their actions unjust, but they were also brainless. After the Hawkwolf Guard killed Li Qingshan, wouldn't they hunt them down and silence them? If they did not combine all their strength for battle right now, instead hoping for a moment of peace and comfort, they would be as foolish as they could be. He raised his hand high into the air. This was no longer a joke between his junior brothers. Instead, it was a heavy hand that resented them for failing to live up to his expectations. He wanted to beat them to their senses, but Li Qingshan grabbed him. The hearts of people were not exactly dark, nor were they exactly bright. Calculations of benefits would always exist in everyone's hearts. It was just that everyone's choices were different. In the face of true life-threatening danger, just how many people would be willing to go through thick and thin with you? Although Li Qingshan felt cold, he still smiled. "They're right. There's nothing you can do to help me. You've witnessed my abilities as a body practitioner. It's easier for me to flee alone. However, Little and has to stay by my side." With that, before Hao Pingyang could persuade him any further, Li Qingshan leapt backwards gently with Little and leaping off the boat. He said, "Be careful. We'll meet again." He turned around and vanished into the black cavern. Zhang Lanqing was still in a daze. He Isher rushed over and controlled the boat, heading towards the cavern on the other side, the zombie Daoist's lair. They parted ways just like that. Actually, Li Qingshan was not particularly optimistic about their chances. Although he had never met the zombie Daoist before, he knew just how cautious and crafty his enemy was from the 2 clashes he had with him. If he did not have absolute confidence in victory, he would definitely vanish into the web-like caverns. If he was willing to stay behind, it would be quite a terrifying matter. Only people with hidden strength like Li Qingshan could ignore this danger. He had already witnessed the battle prowess of the disciples of Moism along the way. Of course, he would not take pleasure in their misfortune and hope that they would die. He was not that narrow-minded, and Hao Pingyang and Zhang Lanqing were very loyal too. He wished them a safe journey from the bottom of his heart. However, he was not a nanny, nor was he the Virgin Mary. He believed he had a clear conscience and had done everything he could. As for the rest, he would leave it to fate and the hearts of people to decide. Zhuozhibwa hurried over with a group of black wolf guards. He sensed the two presences in the two caverns. Li Qingshan did not hide his presence. Gu Jian asked, "Commander, which way do we go first?" Zhuozhibwa said, "Let's kill Li Qingshan first. We can deal with the disciples of Moism later." This was his main objective for coming here in the first place. As the presences drew closer, Li Qingshan smiled. He used the power of the spirit turtle's Niden to control water to walk on the water and charge forward. The caverns rapidly receded before him, sometimes descending and sometimes turning. It was like there was no end to it. He constantly came across new forks and chose new paths without any hesitation. Suddenly, the sound of surging water rang out from up ahead. Li Qingshan seemed to return to the days when he cultivated under the waterfall in the mountains. This was the sound he heard every day. The sound grew louder and louder, becoming deafening. His vision cleared up. The surging river water suddenly dropped down without any prior signs, forming an underground waterfall. Li Qingshan leapt down over 30 meters and landed on a platform in the water. He looked around, and all he saw was emptiness. It was a huge underground cavern, half the size of a football field. It was enough for him to demonify freely and stretch out his limbs. This was not a coincidence. Instead, he had chosen the battlefield along the path that the mechanical insects had discovered. It was also the graveyard of the Hawkwolf guards. From the outside, it seemed even more perfect than the map that the mechanical insects had discovered. He sucked in a deep breath and gestured towards Little Anne with a glance. Little Anne immediately vanished into the water. Without waiting for too long, the murderousness rushed into the cavern very soon. Li Qingshan raised his head and saw Zhuozhibwa and a group of black wolf guards leap down from the waterfall, landing before Li Qingshan. Afterwards, they quickly dispersed, surrounding Li Qingshan. Zhuozhibwa said coldly, "I've finally caught you." Chapter 176. In the gloomy depths of the earth, the sound of a waterfall rang out endlessly. The underground river surged down, gathering into an underground lake in the large cavern. A small island protruded from the center of the lake. Swoosh! Zhuozhibwa and the 7 black wolf guards surrounded Li Qingshan in the center of the island. Every single one of them sneered. Gu Jian said, "Don't tell me this kid has lost his mind from fright. Don't waste your breath on him. Hurry up and kill him." A black wolf guard said impatiently. Xiananda said, "Yeah, Commander. We still have to chase after those Mahis disciples." "I have my plans." Zhuozhibwa seemed to enjoy this feeling very much. He raised his hand to signal the black wolf guards to quiet down. He said to Li Qingshan, "Do you regret becoming enemies with me now? If you had come to Jiaping and behaved a little more politely, I wouldn't have to kill you, right? If you're willing to kneel and beg me right now, I might spare you." The absolute mental advantage he felt when he faced weaker enemies always made him feel very comfortable. Li Qingshan lowered his head and looked at the insignia on his black wolf uniform. The insignia on this is a wolf, not a dog. Seeing how the 7 black wolf guards were furious, he raised his hand. "Don't be angry. There's nothing wrong with being a powerful person's dog, but I just don't like it." A cold glint flashed across Zhuozhibwa's eyes. With a casual wave of his hand, the sharp knife was once again held in his palm. "Before I kill you, I have a few things to ask you. If you are willing to answer honestly, I will let you die a little more painlessly. Don't worry. You don't need to say anything. I'll give you a painless death," Li Qingshan interrupted with a vicious smile. The fangs in his mouth seemed particularly long. Zhuozhibwa suddenly felt a powerful, terrifying demon qi erupt from Li Qingshan, kicking up a whistling gale in the cavern. The black wolf guards raised their hands in fright as they stared at Li Qingshan in disbelief. Li Qingshan tore off his black wolf robe, revealing his sturdy chest. His bronze-colored skin gradually darkened, and there was a hint of steel luster. His eyes lit up with 2 red lights, and his black hair turned scarlet, draping over his shoulders. It continued to grow downwards, 3 feet, 5 feet, 7 feet, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not touch the ground. His aura also continued to rise until it reached the peak. Li Qingshan looked down and said to himself, "It seems to have grown taller again." The medicinal pills he had eaten these days were not in vain. His height was about 27 feet, and he was about to break through the 3-foot mark. Standing there, he was much taller than a 2-story building. His body seemed to be cast from black iron, and he exuded an immovable might like a mountain. Zhuojibua's eyes widened. He said in disbelief, "You're a demon." "That's impossible." Li Qingshan had only joined the Hawkwolf Guard after being examined by Wang Puxi and Gu Yenying. With their cultivation, how could they not discover Li Qingshan's true body? However, he suddenly remembered that the important figure of the Rui Commandery possessed the bloodline of demons in the first place. However, because her bloodline was just too sacred in Great Xia, even more noble than many of the royal clans, many people often forgot about this. Was this part of her scheme? From a certain perspective, his guess was not wrong, but it was not some scheme. Instead, it was just a misunderstanding. He sighed for a moment, but it was all a sudden. If Gu Yenying wanted to set up some scheme, even the current Li Qingshan did not have the right to be a part of it. "Commander, what do we do?" Gu Jian said in a panic. He could clearly sense that Li Qingshan only needed to extend his hand right now, and he could crush him to death. When he thought about how he had always provoked something as terrifying as this, he felt a lingering fear. "I understand now. That's how you killed Zhao Liangqing and Chen Yanin." As Zhuojibwa said that, he had already stabilized his mind. Li Qingshan was not the demon general he originally believed him to be. Although he could assume a human form, he was only a 6th or 7th layer Qi practitioner. He was not completely invincible. Li Qingshan suddenly understood why the great antagonists in stories would always spout nonsense, including Zhuojibwa from earlier. It was because the feeling of power that came from grasping the situation in one's hands was just too great. It was easy for him to think clearly. However, with so many counterexamples before him, he still had to hold back his emotions. He said with a deep, metallic voice, "You've guessed correctly." He raised his left foot, or perhaps his left hoof, in a seemingly unintentional manner before stomping down with great force. The sacred hall, his innate ability, the ox demon tramples. Jump. Zhuojibwa was the first to sense that something was amiss. He leapt into the air. Most of the other Black Wolf guards were veterans of the Jianghu, so their reactions were not slow either. True Qi surged from their feet, and they all shot into the air like rockets. Only a 3rd layer Qi practitioner Black Wolf guard reacted a little slower. Just when he wanted to leap up, the shockwave had already reached his feet and spread through his entire body. Several hundred of his bones immediately shattered, and his skin became riddled with cracks. He exploded with a bang. Zhuojibwa and the other Black Wolf guards looked down in fright, but they were not looking at the dead Black Wolf guard. Instead, they looked at the entire island. With a great rumble, the island shattered, cut into countless pieces by countless cracks. At the center was the bottom of Li Qingshan's right foot. The lake water surged violently, swallowing the rock and soil. Li Qingshan crushed the island with a single stomp, sinking it. It formed several hundred vortexes of various sizes. Li Qingshan stood on the waves, gazing up between the vortexes with his scarlet-red eyes. Zhuojibwa gripped his dagger firmly. What kind of terrifying power was this? It was not something a regular demon possessed. If he was no different from regular demons, why would Li Qingshan need to practice the ox demon's fist of great strength? With his recent days of cultivation, he was close to breaking through to the 2nd layer of the ox demon's fist of great strength. He could feel his strength grow by leaps and bounds again. Although the ability became more difficult to practice and required more and more resources, the power it brought was greater and greater. Little and hid at the bottom of the surging water. Her lips curled into a smile, but she was in no hurry to strike, as she could sense that Li Qingshan was currently in high spirits. He needed some release. Li Qingshan said with some pity, "This move doesn't seem to be very useful. Let's try this move." He sucked in a deep breath and roared at the sky. The tiger demon's slaughter's howl. The sound waves shook up the surroundings. The wind swept through the air like blades. It was countless times more powerful than the wind blades from the wind entwining blade. Zhuojibua's expression changed. Oh no! Before the wind had arrived, the sound had arrived. The two black wolf guards at the very front clutched their heads in pain. Their true qi had basically dispersed, and they were about to fall out of the air. However, in the next moment, they were reduced to a bloody mist by the gust of wind that followed closely behind, scattering through the air. The howl echoed through the cavern for quite some time. The other black wolf guards barely managed to return to their senses from the shock of the sound waves. When they saw this, their hearts completely sank. The enemy in front of them was not something that any of the enemies they had encountered in the past could compare to. As long as they were struck by it, they would be smashed into pieces and consigned to eternal damnation. It was impossible for them to even think about getting injured and escaping. Li Qingshan said, "That's not a bad move. It should be described as a good combo." The enemy had been forced into the air by the ox demon tramples. Even Qi practitioners would be unable to move, so they could not dodge the tiger demon's slaughter of the tiger demon's howl. Li Qingshan was killing his subordinates wantonly in an almost experimental manner. Zhuojibua was both surprised and furious, and he even felt a sliver of fear. He had never thought that a hunt he had been so confident in would actually reverse the roles of the hunter and the prey. It had become a one-sided slaughter by Li Qingshan. This kid is even more dangerous than the zombie Daoist. If I don't find a way to turn the situation around, even I'll be in danger today. Zhuojibua quickly chanted an incantation. He separated his hands and pulled out a ball of fire. The flames surged into a scorching dragon of fire, illuminating the entire cavern as it let out a long roar. It lunged towards Li Qingshan with its claws and fangs. He had already used his full strength in this strike. It could not be compared to when he was in the Hawkwolf Guard. Even if he could not heavily injure Li Qingshan, he had to turn the situation around and gain the upper hand. Li Qingshan completely ignored the incoming flames. He extended his claws and grabbed the dragon's neck. The dragon's roar came to a halt. Zhuojibua was not surprised. Instead, he rejoiced. He practiced the Bing fire method of qi of the 5 elements. It could ignite his true qi and turn it into scorching flames. All fire techniques seemed to be assisted by a god of fire. This was true qi that was extremely suited for battle. Its destructive power was only second to the gung metal method of sharpness, and its destructive power over a large area might even surpass it. The temperature of the flames could even melt steel in an instant. Since he was bold enough to grab it with his bare hands, he'd better leave a hand behind. However, his smile immediately froze. Under Zhuojibua's control, the fire dragon struggled desperately in Li Qingshan's hand. The flames on its body grew more and more intense, almost to the point where it shone with a golden luster. However, it was still firmly trapped under Li Qingshan's hand. Red light flashed through Li Qingshan's eyes. He closed his hand forcefully, and the fire dragon turned into countless shattered sparks, drifting through the air. The same move is useless against me. However, it did not even leave behind a burn mark on his hand. The 5 elements reinforced and countered each other. His demon qi was of the water element, so it just happened to suppress fire. The demon qi of demons completely surpassed the true qi of humans in terms of quantity, so extinguishing Zhuojibua's flames was nothing difficult. The 4 remaining Black Wolf guards used this opportunity to launch their full-powered attacks. They knew they were facing death, so every single one of them used their full strength. Low-grade or even mid-grade talismans turned into flames, wind blades, and lightning as they shot towards Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan said, "Spirit Turtle's profound shell." A faint, blue barrier of light protected him. Not a single attack managed to penetrate the Spirit Turtle's profound shell and reach him. All of the Black Wolf guards despaired. How were they supposed to defeat an enemy that they could not even touch? Zhuojibua was filled with regret. He did not have any irreconcilable grievances with Li Qingshan. If he had known this earlier, why would he have turned against him in a moment of anger? Gu Jian called out, "Commander, let's retreat." The turtle shell is quite effective, but I wonder if it can block the assassination of a mid-grade spiritual artifact. Li Qingshan muttered to himself. He raised his head and looked at Zhuojibua, waiting to continue experimenting with his moves. However, Zhuo Zhibua ordered firmly, "Retreat." Chapter 177. As a matter of fact, Zhuo Zhibua was not even bold enough to try using his flying blade. The range of his artifact was 30 steps. To regular people, that was quite a distance. However, with Li Qingshan's terrifying physique, he only needed to take a step and extend his hand to reach him easily. Swoosh! Zhuo Zhibua had not lost his mind when facing an enemy like that in close combat. He would probably die to Li Qingshan before his flying blade could pierce through the barrier around Li Qingshan. He could not die here. As long as he returned and exposed Li Qingshan's true face, powerful masters of the Hawkwolf Guard would come to deal with him. How could the Hawkwolf Guard allow demons to mix with them? As Gu Jian fled out of the cave, he looked back and discovered in fright that Li Qingshan had vanished from where he was. The colossal figure had instantly appeared before him with unbelievable, terrifying speed. Before he could even respond, he felt his body tighten and ache, and he lost consciousness. Li Qingshan grabbed Gu Jian and casually tossed him towards another Black Wolf Guard. The Black Wolf Guard cried out in surprise. The wind whistled past his ears, and he suddenly looked back. All he saw was Gu Jian's bleeding face inches away. With a bang, the two of them collided into the wall together and turned into a pile of flesh and blood. They slowly slid down and were no longer separated. Li Qingshan opened his mouth and spat out. The Spirit Turtle's demon core shot out, piercing the other fourth-layer Black Wolf Guard and reducing him to a corpse. In the blink of an eye, only Zhuo Zhibua and Xianxia remained. The unstoppable Hawkwolf Guard had basically been wiped out. While all of this seemed to take a long time to describe, it actually happened without the slightest hesitation. Zhuo Zhibua fled the fastest. He had already arrived at the entrance of the waterfall, while Xianxia treaded on the water as well. When he reached the end of the waterfall, he suddenly saw the demon core turn around in the air and fly towards him. He cried out, "Save me, Commander!" Zhuo Zhibua would never stop. Xianxia bellowed out and unleashed his full strength. The true qi he had cultivated for all these years surged towards the incoming demon core like the tide. However, before an absolute difference in strength, any resistance was pointless. The demon core only paused slightly before suddenly accelerating, piercing Xianxia's head and leaving behind a tiny hole. Holy Church, whether it was a fifth-layer qi practitioner or a fourth-layer qi practitioner, it was no different from killing a regular person to Li Qingshan. Zhuo Zhibua didn't care about what was happening behind him and rushed straight to the entrance of the cave. Although the cave wasn't small, it couldn't accommodate Li Qingshan's huge body. As long as he entered it, he would be able to escape. Suddenly, he was alarmed. He forcefully twisted his body in midair. A white prayer bead flew out of the waterfall and brushed past him. With lightning speed, it brushed past his chest and tore off a piece of flesh. "You are..." Zhuo Zhibua saw the child that Li Qingshan always brought with him, blocking the entrance of the cave with an expressionless face, standing on the silent flames. Although he did not release any aura, the sense of danger he exuded was not inferior to Li Qingshan's. Moreover, he could control an artifact. This child was actually an expert above the sixth layer, but how could he be so young? Zhuo Zhibua was left dumbfounded. Li Qingshan called back the demon core. Just as he was about to fall down, he used his demon qi with a thought, and a pillar of water rose up from the underground lake. It lifted up Li Qingshan and went straight for Zhuo Zhibua. There was a wolf ahead and a tiger behind, and each one was more terrifying than the last. Within the suffocating killing intent, Zhuo Zhibua's heart almost stopped beating. At that moment, he was filled with regret. He did not have any irresolvable conflicts with Li Qingshan. If he had ignored Li Qingshan in the beginning, he would still be the authoritative Black Hawk commander of Jiaping City. He would have all the women he wanted, and he would never end up like this. However, it was already too late for regret. In this moment of life and death, Zhuo Zhibua's eyes reddened. He raised his right hand, and a flying dagger shot towards little N. If she was willing to move aside, then so be it. If she was unwilling, then he would drag her down with him even if he had to die with her. As expected, little N did not move aside. Forming a seal with her hand, the skull prayer beads also flew toward Zhuozhibua. Li Qingshan called out, "Little Anne." He watched helplessly as the flying dagger pierced little Anne's chest. At the same time, the skull prayer beads struck Zhuozhibua's body, but they were blocked by a layer of protective true qi. They failed to pierce through Zhuozhibua in a single stroke, but they still sent him flying towards the waterfall. Li Qingshan's huge tiger claw carried a strong gust of wind as it clawed toward Zhuozhibua. Zhuozhibua's body lost balance, and his true qi was injured, so how could he avoid this claw? Li Qingshan immediately used all his strength, and with his unparalleled divine strength and enormous demonic aura, he crushed the layer of protective true qi on Zhuozhibua's body. Then he did not stop. With the sound of bones breaking, Zhuozhibua violently spat out a mouthful of blood. Most of the bones in his body were broken, and he could no longer use any tricks. Li Qingshan rushed in front of little N. "Are you all right?" Zhuozhibua knew that he was going to die after being held in Li Qingshan's palm. He spat out a mouthful of blood and laughed wildly. "He was hit by my spiritual flame saber. He's definitely going to die." Little N shook her head, indicating that she was fine. Li Qingshan was still worried. As if he was picking up a doll, he picked up the little girl in his palm and examined her. Her skin was as smooth as jade, and she was completely unharmed. There was only a small hole in her clothes. How is this possible? Zhuozhibua's eyes widened in disbelief. Even if he was a qi trainer, he would definitely die if his vital organs, such as his heart and head, were pierced. The outer layer of little Anne's flesh and blood, including her vital organs and heart, were all condensed. It was the appearance of her skin. Her real body was a skeleton. Even if her physical body was completely destroyed, she was still alive and kicking. Something like the heart could be repaired after being pierced. It wouldn't take much effort for her to do so. That was why Xiaoan didn't dodge. Instead, she took Zhuozhibua's attack head-on. Zhuozhibua suffered a great loss because of the information asymmetry. If he had not been so cruel, he might have been able to jump between the gaps of Li Qingshan's fingers for a while. Li Qingshan raised Zhuozhibua in front of his eyes. "You are much weaker than I thought." Zhuozhibua said, "Don't kill me. I can give you great benefits." At the same time, he focused all his attention on the spirit flame saber, looking for an opportunity to give Li Qingshan a fatal blow. "Keep it for yourself." Li Qingshan tightened his grip. He did not listen to Zhuozhibua's nonsense and crushed him to death. The best way not to be bewitched by the enemy was to not give them a chance to speak. The spirit flame saber fell into the water silently. Zhuozhibua had seen Li Qingshan's true form, so Li Qingshan would never allow him to continue living in this world. Right now, the only benefits he needed were pills, large quantities of pills. As long as his cultivation increased, there would be benefits everywhere. The Soaring Dragon Elder's Sumeru ring was in his possession. Even if Zhuozhibua took out all of his wealth, it probably would not be as valuable as a single item in there. Li Qingshan found 100 treasures pouch from the bloody mess. He called out, "Little and clear the area." Flames immediately surged over and took away Zhuozhibua's corpse. They did not even leave behind a single droplet of blood. Afterwards, they dispersed and devoured the corpses of all the Black Wolf guards, reducing them to the purest energy. Whether it was their bones or flesh, the quality of qi practitioners far surpassed that of regular people. They were rare delicacies. The color of the skull prayer beads became even purer. Afterwards, he returned with 700 treasures pouches and 7 low-grade spiritual artifacts. Li Qingshan picked up the spirit flame saber that had fallen into the water. It was a true mid-grade spiritual artifact, so it went without saying that it was worth quite a lot. However, before he could even check it, he suddenly sensed something. "Someone's coming." Little and nodded, expressing that he had sensed it too. Although the person concealed his aura as much as possible, slivers of it still leaked out, unable to fool the senses of the two of them. The person was actually a 6th-layer qi practitioner. Li Qingshan said to little N, "Let's hide and see who it is." He used the spirit turtle's method of Qi suppression, and the spirit turtle's demon core sank into his dantian. He turned back to normal, concealing all of his aura, and dove into the depths of the pitch-black lake with little n. Before long, a figure arrived at the entrance of the cave. He scanned the cavern silently like a cat. The dark underground greatly affected his vision, so he could not see into the water at all. However, Li Qingshan saw him clearly. The person also wore a black uniform of the Hawkwolf Guard, but the patterns on his clothes were different from regular Black Wolf Guards. Li Qingshan immediately realized that this person was the Black Wolf commander he had never met before. He had no idea how he had ended up here. The newcomer was Lao Shishan. He had followed Zhuozhibua all the way here, waiting for a chance to take revenge. However, when he followed Zhuozhibua to the first fork, he almost couldn't tell which direction Zhuozhibua had gone. Only by relying on his sense of quantity did he choose the correct direction. He had only just reached the 6th layer, so he was still rather unable to control his true qi. As a result, Li Qingshan discovered him easily. Lao Shishan widened his eyes and patrolled the cavern extremely carefully. The demon qi he had sensed earlier was no joke. If he really did run into such a powerful demon, it would be extremely dangerous. The auras of the qi practitioners earlier vanished one by one. As it seemed, they were probably done for. He did not want to follow in their footsteps. However, after sensing for quite a while, he found nothing in the end. The demon qi seemed to have vanished into thin air. The spirit turtle's method of qi suppression was so effective that even a 9th layer qi practitioner like Grandma Shiman could not sense it, let alone a 6th layer qi practitioner like him who had just grasped the basics. Don't tell me Zhuozhibua is dead. Lao Shishan thought of this, but his emotions were very complicated. He was happy but also regretful. He had endured hardships for several years, and just as he was about to take revenge on his old enemy had died in the hands of some inexplicable demon. However, he was still more happy at the end of the day. He also decided not to take any risks, silently retreating along the same path he had come from. Li Qingshan and Little and burst out of the water and sat on the beach to rest. Let's see what we've found. Suddenly, he thought, I wonder how Pingyang and the others are doing. I wonder if they've found the zombie Daoist dwelling. Hopefully, they're fine. Fresh blood continuously flowed from Jin Bao's body. He died with his eyes wide open and fear of death was frozen on his face. However, he was unable to stop the arrival of death. From his chest to his lower abdomen, his abdomen was cut open with a heavy technique. He died an extremely tragic death. Chapter 178. Chapter 76. Iron Plate Corpse. The small boat drifted with the waves. It fell silent for a moment, and the atmosphere was rather cold. Hao Pingyang's face was completely sunken. He sat at the front of the boat, gazing into the depths of the cavern. The waves he kicked up landed on him. Zhang Lanqing furrowed his brows firmly. All he cared about was steering the boat with his head lowered. Jin Yuan and Jin Bao both felt rather awkward and ashamed. They said nothing. He Isher suddenly said, How many years have we known each other? We've only known Li Qingshan for less than a day, yet you're turning us against each other for the sake of an outsider? They had all attended the 100 schools of thought when they were young, and they were in the same year. Although there were differences in strength due to their different talents and efforts, it did not affect their relationship. Or in other words, Hao Pingyang did not look down on them because they were weaker than him. Instead, he took great care of them. Jin Yuan said, Isher is right. Senior brother Hao, don't be angry. Qingshan will be fine. Our priority right now is to work together to deal with the zombie Daoist and complete the mission Master gave us. After a moment of silence, Hao Pingyang sighed heavily. He nodded slightly and said, Make your preparations. This time, you won't have that kid to look after you. Jin Bao said confidently, Don't worry. We'll definitely perform well this time. These images flashed through Jin Yuan's head rapidly, but they had lost their original color. They became pale white, only leaving behind Jin Bao's deathly still face. Tears constantly flowed down his face. He glanced at his younger brother one last time, but he dared not stop. He was like a headless fly, running around randomly in the pitch-black cavern. The heavy, beast-like breathing behind him grew closer and closer. A boulder suddenly blocked his path. He could no longer advance. He had actually reached a dead end unknowingly. How did this happen? If he had stayed behind and faced the enemy with Li Qingshan, would the outcome have been different? Yes, it would definitely have been different. Even a Black Hawk commander could not be more terrifying than this monster. Bang! Jin Yuan turned his head abruptly and saw a human head flying out of the darkness. It bounced a few times on the ground and landed beside his feet. It was the head of a puppet that he had released to block the monster. It had been smashed into pieces in a single exchange. A tall figure walked out of the darkness in front of him. His feet seemed to be wearing iron boots, clanking as he stepped on the ground. His eyes revealed a bloodthirsty light, and 4 long fangs protruded from his lips. He was panting like a hungry beast. Ah! Gold Ingot howled as he fired a string of fire crow bolts from his 1000-mechanism crossbow. Clang, 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 clang. When they landed on the black shadow, sparks flew everywhere. The sharp fire crow arrows were actually unable to penetrate the monster's skin, and the series of flame explosions were also unable to harm it in the slightest. Instead, it seemed to be completely enraged as it let out a roar. In the light of the fire, the monster's body was covered with a layer of iron armor. It wasn't worn on his body, but was tightly attached to his body, covering his entire body. Every inch of his skin, even his face, was covered with half of an iron mask, making him look extremely cold and ferocious. Don't come over. Senior apprentice brother, save me. The monster leaped up and pounced at Gold Ingot like a bolt of lightning. A sharp claw stabbed into Gold Ingot's chest and lifted him into the air. Then, it bit down on his neck and sucked large mouthfuls of blood. Gold Ingot struggled with all his might, constantly hammering the monster's body, but it was to no avail. His arms and legs gradually lost strength, and after twitching a few times, he fell to the ground. His last thought flashed through his mind. If I didn't run away, I could at least have died with Senior Apprentice Brother and the others. Senior Apprentice Brother, I'm sorry. Suddenly, a hurried bell rang out from the depths of the cave. The monster suddenly raised its head and carried Gold Ingot's corpse. It let out an unwilling roar and ran in the direction of the bell. The monster carried the 2 corpses to a wide cave, then lay down on Gold Ingot's neck and sucked his blood. The stone coffin was no longer on the platform in the cave. The thick chains that had originally locked the stone coffin were now tightly binding Hao Pingyang. To no surprise, He Yishe and Zhang Lanqing stood beside him. Their limbs were tied up as well. They were haggard and on the brink of death. Hao Pingyang became utterly furious when he saw Jin Yuan and Jin Bao's miserable deaths. He called out, "Jin Yuan, Jin Bao." The chains rattled wildly. Zhang Lanqing and He Yishe were devastated as well. Kukukuku. The zombie Daoist laughed madly. You want to deal with me with just a bunch of trash? Have you witnessed the power of an iron plate corpse? He had spent all these years hiding underground and studying corpse refinement painstakingly, but he had not only refined a bunch of useless corpses and zombies. These things could only be regarded as rudimentary items in the path of corpse refinement. They could be used to bully the weak, but they were basically useless against powerful Qi practitioners who were skilled in battle. Only by refining an iron plate corpse could he claim to know how to refine corpses. The zombie Daoist said, "Do you know just how much effort I spent to refine this iron plate corpse?" Hao Pingyang and the other 2 cursed aloud. The zombie Daoist said to himself, I spent several years digging up graves and corpses everywhere. Who knows how many people I killed, but I only found 12 suitable corpses out of over 1,000. Afterwards, I refined a lot of refined metal into molten iron and poured it over these corpses layer by layer, dissolving and replacing their original flesh and blood. Just this process took me another 3 years, and I lost over half of the corpses. Afterwards, I constantly watered them with fresh blood and refined them with corpse refinement. Only then did the corpses gain intelligence and come alive. This took me another 3 years, but only this one succeeded in the end. The owner of this corpse was a top expert who practiced external martial arts. I poured molten iron on him and used true Qi elixirs to keep him alive. I didn't let him die until he had accumulated enough resentment and hatred before I started to refine him. Sure enough, this is the only one that was successful. I really can't be merciful. Isher shuddered all over. Having scorching molten iron poured over him was a terrifying form of torture. The zombie Daoist's words chilled his heart even more. The zombie Daoist laughed madly. Although it took a decade of hard work, it was worth it. It was worth it. The iron plate corpse was impervious to weapons and moved like the wind. Its body was as tough as a spiritual artifact. Even sixth-layer Qi practitioners could only avoid it if they encountered it. When Hao Pingyang barged into the dwelling with his junior brothers, the zombie Daoist, who had been prepared long ago, released the iron plate corpse. The zombie Daoist had been prepared long ago. He released the iron plate corpse, and the outcome was as clear as day. They were basically surrounded by two sixth-layer Qi practitioners, and they had the assistance of a group of zombies. They were heavily injured very soon. Jin Bao took advantage of Hao Pingyang clashing with the zombie Daoist and the iron plate corpse attacking the others to flee. Jin Yuan immediately followed him, but the iron plate corpse still caught up to him in the end, and he died a violent death. The zombie Daoist vented the depression he had accumulated for many years. He calmed down and said sinisterly, "Do you know why I'm telling you all this? That's because I want to refine you into iron plate corpses as well. With the experience from last time, it'll definitely be very easy this time." This was the terror of refining corpses. As long as he had the time, he could become an army all by himself. Hao Pingyang continued to curse loudly. All of the blood immediately drained from Zhang Lanqing and He Yishi's faces. If they were refined into iron plate corpses, just the process alone would be worse than death. He Yishi's willpower collapsed. He sobbed and begged, "Please, don't kill me. I'll give you everything. Once I become a proper mechanism master, I'll be able to earn lots and lots of spiritual stones. I can't die here." Hao Pingyang said, "Don't beg him. He won't spare you. We disciples of Moism have to die like men even if we die. Master will avenge us." He Yisher said resentfully, "It's all your fault. If you didn't bring us here, it would all be your fault." Hao Pingyang was stunned. He was speechless. Zhang Lanqing said, "He Yisher, have you lost your mind?" He Yisher said, "I haven't. You're the same as him. Fifth or sixth layer, beating and cursing at us as you please. All of that is because of your talent and cultivation. What's so great about that?" Hao Pingyang's heart chilled. With his cultivation, he only had 30% of the profits. He could have easily found better companions. He just wanted to take care of a few classmates he was on good terms with, but he never thought he would end up like this. The zombie Daoist laughed aloud as if he was watching a show. Then he fawned over the zombie Daoist. "Daoist, master, I'm willing to be your slave. I'll do whatever you want me to do. I just hope you can spare my life." The zombie Daoist said, "All right. If you want to be my slave, there'll be plenty of opportunities." After a pause, he said, "Just wait until you become a zombie. Compared to living people, zombies are much more reliable. TSK, with your talent, you probably won't be able to become an iron plate corpse." He turned to Hao Pingyang. "You're not bad. It's a pity that Li Qingshan didn't come with you, or I'd have 3 iron plate corpses. Who in Jiaping City would be my opponent then?" As soon as He Yisher ravished with joy, he sank back into despair. His face was ashen. Even as a zombie, he was not as good as Hao Pingyang. That was extremely sarcastic. With a gentle smack, a small figure shot past quickly. "Who's there?" The zombie Daoist suddenly turned around and looked at the pitch-black entrance. He controlled the restless iron plate corpse before waving his right hand. 4 zombies leapt out. He had specially refined the 4 zombies, so they were much more powerful than the zombies in the morgue. Although they were not as powerful as iron plate corpses, they were equivalent to 3rd or 4th layer Qi practitioners. However, when the zombies leapt out, they did not make any sound at all. The zombie Daoist's expression changed. His connection with the zombies was severed at the same time. "Who is it? Get your ass out here. Brother Hao, you really don't make friends." Li Qingshan walked in from the entrance. Zhang Lanqing said, "Qingshan." The zombie Daoist was overjoyed instead of surprised. "It's you." He studied Li Qingshan up and down. You really are great material. If you can be refined into an iron plate corpse, you might even be a little more powerful than this guy. Hao Pingyang said, "Be careful, that's an iron plate corpse." It's too late. A cold light flashed through the zombie Daoist's eyes. He struck Yin Ling, and the iron plate corpse lunged towards Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan retreated rapidly. At the same time, he drew his wind-entwining blade and swung it forcefully. It shot past the zombie Daoist and directly shot towards the chains around Hao Pingyang's limbs. Chapter 179. The zombie knows martial arts, don't even think about it. The zombie Daoist extended his hand and easily grabbed the wind-entwining blade that shot past him. He swung it forcefully at the stone platform, and the damaged wind-entwining blade immediately shattered. With a rip, the black wolf uniform that could block crossbow bolts was ripped open 3 times by the iron plate corpse's claws. Li Qingshan was forced out of the dwelling in an extremely horrible shape. He called out, "Little Anne." Clang. The crossbow string tore through the air, producing a sharp sound. The zombie Daoist suddenly looked to the left. All he saw was the child standing silently under the moonlight on the roof of the morgue, holding 2,000 mechanism crossbows. He shot out 60 fire crow bolts, which turned into 60 specks of red light. They flew up, down, left, and right, sealing off all of the zombie Daoist's escape routes. "Luring me away?" The zombie Daoist sneered. Since he could not dodge, then he would not. However, 6th-layer Qi practitioners possessed powerful true Qi aside from refining corpses. How could he be killed so easily? True Qi surged out violently from his sea of Qi. He took off his low-grade spiritual artifact robes and flung them before him. Channeling his true Qi into them, the robes turned into a metal screen. Boom, boom, boom. The fire crow bolts landed on the robes and were immediately triggered, exploding. Although his Daoist robes had been reduced to ashes, the zombie Daoist was completely unscathed. He took out an identical 1,000 mechanism crossbow. "Now try mine." He had just obtained this from Zhang Lanqing. He wanted to give him a taste of his own medicine. Zhang Lanqing had never thought that the weapon he had created would end up being his enemy's weapon. Little and did not block it forcefully. He retreated behind a stone pillar, and with a few clangs, a few fire crow bolts nailed themselves into the rock. They exploded loudly, blowing the stone pillar to pieces. However, Little and had vanished from behind. The zombie Daoist frowned. Suddenly, he turned the 1,000 mechanism crossbow around and aimed it at Hao Pingyang. "What are you trying to do?" He shot out a few fire crow bolts. Hao Pingyang lunged over with the broken chains in an attempt to launch a sneak attack. Little and did not think he could defeat the zombie Daoist with just the 1,000 mechanism crossbow. He wanted to use this opportunity to save Hao Pingyang. A few fire crow bolts accurately destroyed the chains. The zombie Daoist was observant and alert, so how could he not know? Hao Pingyang neither dodged nor retreated. He swung the metal chain viciously and blew up the fire crow arrow. He charged at the zombie Daoist furiously as if he wanted to perish together with him. He was filled with endless fury that he wanted to vent. Faced with Hao Pingyang, who lunged over like a mad tiger, the zombie Daoist stood there without moving at all. He constantly fired the 1,000 mechanism crossbow, but he was extremely restrained, pausing slightly after firing 2 or 3 bolts. He was not like Jin Bao and the others, who fired them all at once. The light from the explosion flickered on his face, illuminating the sneer on his face. How could he be defeated by an enemy he had just subdued? As soon as Hao Pingyang arrived 5 steps away from the zombie Daoist, the violent fire crow arrows forcefully blasted open the chains, creating a gap. Finally, an arrow passed through the gap between the chains and shot towards his chest. Hao Pingyang tried his best to use his true Qi to block the attack, but he was also sent flying by the explosion. He fiercely crashed into the stone wall several dozen feet away, and his efforts were in vain. A Qi practitioner who had lost their spiritual artifact was like a tiger that had lost its claws and teeth, and he was a feeble tiger at that. The zombie Daoist lowered the 1,000 mechanism crossbow with contempt. Suddenly he was alarmed and hurriedly raised his hand to protect his waist, but it was already too late. A tiny figure shot over with unbelievable speed and snatched the bell from his waist. The zombie Daoist was surprised, but he did not lose his composure. He said coldly, "Do you think you can control the Iron Plate corpse just because you have the bell?" The bell was only a tool to summon and control the Iron Plate corpse. However, what truly controlled the Iron Plate corpse was his own will. The bell needed to be activated by him in order to be effective. Little and turned around and rushed out of the cave. All he saw was the Iron Plate corpse chasing Li Qingshan everywhere. Although he had the Swift Breeze talisman to accelerate him, his black wolf uniform had already become tattered. Fortunately, he had the ox demon forge as its hide, which was why he was not too heavily injured. If it were not for the fact that he had to consider how to explain himself, he would have transformed a long time ago and killed the Iron Plate corpse. Although the Iron Plate corpse was fast and powerful, it was not intelligent. It did not know any techniques either, so it was not his opponent. Little and shook the bell, but the Iron Plate corpse did not seem to hear him at all. It continued to chase after Li Qingshan. Sure enough, it needed the zombie Daoist himself to control it. Little and placed down the bell and raised his hand. Li Qingshan dodged the Iron Plate corpse's claw by a hair's breadth. Suddenly, the Iron Plate corpse seemed to sense something. It turned around abruptly, and all it saw was a swathe of dark red flames filling the cave and surging over. A familiar hint of fear suddenly appeared in his resentful and bloodthirsty heart. The Iron Plate corpse did not possess true qi or demon qi. Its armor alone could block the attacks of any technique or spiritual artifact, but right now, it struggled to block the invasion of the flames. The dark red flames swallowed the Iron Plate corpse, wrapping around it like a snake. It all poured into the Iron Plate corpse's mouth, leaving nothing behind. The Iron Plate corpse's movements suddenly halted. Faint, dark red light shone from the depths of its eyes. In its skull, its shriveled brain had been burnt away, turning into a furnace that began to dominate the Iron Plate corpse's body. Little and shook the bell, and the Iron Plate corpse immediately arrived before her. Of course, it was not the bell that was controlling it right now, but Little Anne's flames. Her flames could attach themselves to the skulls of inanimate objects and control their bones. The bodies of regular people or even qi practitioners were not worth controlling, as their flesh and blood would naturally decay. Bones that had not been refined were limited in strength, so it was not worth wasting her energy on. However, the Iron Plate corpse was different. After being refined, it would not decay even after 1,000 years, and it possessed tremendous strength. It was basically like it had been prepared for her. This was the absolute suppression that high-level abilities had over low-level techniques. Their cultivations were clearly similar, but it did not even have the power to threaten her. Li Qingshan smiled. Well done. Just like that, he would have a powerful helper, and his strength would increase drastically. It would also be much more convenient for him to do anything. One of them was that he could kill the zombie Daoist in a perfectly justifiable manner. Little and copied Li Qingshan and shrugged. She smiled. In the dwelling, Zhang Lanqing and He Yishe, who had just seen hope, sank into despair once again. They believed that before long, the Iron Plate corpse would return with Li Qingshan and Little Anne's corpses, just like Jin Yuan and Jin Bao. Hao Pingyang pushed himself up from the wall with difficulty and stared at the zombie Daoist with a sharp gaze. However, he was currently injured, and most of his true qi had been depleted. He did not have any spiritual stones or pills to replenish it either, so he posed no threat to the zombie Daoist at all. The zombie Daoist was filled with confidence, but whenever he thought of Little N, he would feel rather uneasy. Suddenly, his eyes widened. His connection with the Iron Plate corpse had actually been severed. He immediately lost all of his composure and charged out of the cave without any regard. This was the fruit of many years of hard work. He could not afford to lose it. No matter the price, he had to take back control of the Iron Plate corpse. Before he had even made it out of the cave, a tall figure blocked the entrance. It was the Iron Plate corpse. The zombie Daoist chanted a technique in a hurry and used a technique, but all of his orders were like rocks sinking into the ocean. He received no response at all. Little and shook the bell, and the iron plate corpse swung its claws, reaching towards the zombie Daoist. The zombie Daoist was filled with disbelief. How could the iron plate corpse that he had refined for so many years be taken away so easily? If that were the case, then all the corpse refiners in the world would be dead. However, the cruel reality was right before him. He had no choice but to believe it. He had only taken out a decade of hard work to enjoy it for a while before it was forcefully taken away. This feeling was like a child he had raised after so much difficulty, only to be called father by someone else. It was so disgusting that he wanted to vomit blood. Good! Hao Pingyang cried out. Zhang Lanqing and he sure beamed as well. They did not know how to refine corpses, so they had no idea how strange it was. They only felt that Li Qingshan's luck was just too great. He had actually managed to turn the tables unbelievably. His mind was in a mess, and so was his movements. There was a flash of blood, and 4 horrific wounds appeared on the zombie Daoist's chest. However, the pain made him return to his senses immediately. He turned around and fled. Where there was life, there was hope. He already had the experience of refining the iron plate corpse. As long as he could escape, there would always be a chance for him to make a comeback. The iron plate corpse blocked the zombie Daoist's way. It raised its hand and threw a punch, compressing the air and producing a sharp whistle. The zombie Daoist blocked with his palms in front of him instinctively, but the iron plate corpse used its terrifying strength to forcefully smash through his protective true qi, sending him flying. The zombie Daoist stared at the iron plate corpse with widened eyes. It's impossible for my iron plate corpse to be so powerful. He knew exactly how much power the items he refined possessed. The current iron plate corpse was much more powerful than when he controlled it just now. This was obviously the work of Little Anne's pale, red flames. Her flames could turn even regular skeletons into powerful warriors, so it would obviously benefit the iron plate corpse greatly. And when the zombie Daoist controlled the iron plate corpse, all he did was issue an order, and the iron plate corpse would attack instinctively out of its thirst for blood. It did not care about any moves or how it used its strength. However, Little Anne was particular about it. Under the control of the flames, the iron plate corpse was basically like a clone. She could control it to make the most detailed movements. This was just like how an ordinary person had suddenly practiced inner force and understood moves. Obviously, their strength would increase drastically. Before the zombie Daoist could even return to his senses, the iron plate corpse strode over. It seemed to move with some kind of footwork, making it impossible to determine where it was attacking. It was completely different from its straightforward method of attack. The zombie Daoist took a great step back and avoided the range of the iron plate corpse's claws. Afterwards, he stared at it in disbelief. The iron plate corpse raised its leg and kicked him in the face violently. The shockwave twisted the zombie Daoist's face, and he spat out a few teeth. Why did the iron plate corpse know how to whip its leg? He had never heard of an iron plate corpse using its leg to attack an enemy. It had always used its claws and teeth. Before the zombie Daoist could even land on the ground, the iron plate corpse caught up and grabbed his calf. With a shoulder throw, it threw him against the ground viciously before lifting him up and throwing him against a stone pillar on the side. The iron plate corpse's movements were like that of a master of external martial arts, using brute force to overcome technique. All that was left was speed. Li Qingshan could even tell that many of the movements were imitating his ox demon's fist of great strength and the tiger demon's fist of bone forging. Little Anne had seen Li Qingshan practice these two fist techniques countless times. Right now, he was using them all through the iron plate corpse. The zombie Daoist did not even have the strength to fight back. Li Qingshan sighed. Sure enough, zombies know martial arts. No one can stop them. P.S. I've accidentally dropped out of the top 40 in my monthly votes. There's not much difference between the people before me. I need to work harder. I need to work harder. I need to work harder too. The following scenes will only become more and more impressive. Chapter 180. The Death of the Zombie Daoist. Bang. 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 The mighty 6th layer Qi practitioner, the zombie Daoist, was tossed around by the iron plate corpse like a broken sack, He was thrown around until he became disoriented. He only did not die immediately due to the protection of his true qi. However, he was unable to break free from the iron plate corpse's grip at all. Even if he lived, he would only allow Little and to play with him a little longer. Hao Pingyang and the other two cheered him on in the beginning, but they were all stunned now. Their backs became covered in a layer of cold sweat. As it turned out, the zombie Daoist had not unleashed the power of the iron plate corpse at all. If the iron plate corpse had been so fierce right from the beginning, the five of them would not have been its opponent even if they worked together. Li Qingshan went up and helped Hao Pingyang up. He took out a healing pill and a qi-gathering pill and placed them in his mouth. "Brother Hao, are you all right?" He glanced at Jin Yuan and Jin Bao's corpses. "I've come too late." Hao Pingyang thanked him with difficulty. Afterwards, his lips seemed to stick together, unable to say anything else. The threat of death receded, but pain and exhaustion immediately engulfed him. He was not without fear. "Rest up." Li Qingshan patted his shoulder, and he settled down. He leaned against the stone wall and meditated. Li Qingshan then went to untie Heisher and Zhang Lanqing. Their situations were similar to Hao Pingyang's. Zhang Lanqing still managed to thank him reluctantly, but Heisher was directly stunned. His eyes widened and his mouth hung slightly agape. Escaping from death should have been something worth celebrating, but he was unable to do so. He was tempted to find a hole in the ground and crawl into it. Li Qingshan said to Little N, "That's enough." The iron plate corpse grabbed the zombie Daoist's head and smashed it against the ground. In the beginning, the zombie Daoist struggled desperately, letting out a few roars and roars, but now, he did not even have the strength to struggle anymore. Blood spurted from his head. This no longer seemed like a battle. It seemed more like a nasty game played by children. For Little and she did not have Li Qingshan's abhorrence of evil. She could not differentiate the value of the zombie Daoist's life from the red and black ants. Of course, the zombie Daoist was better. It was delicious and fun. The bell rang, and the iron plate corpse stopped. Little and blinked at Li Qingshan, asking him if he had any other questions. Li Qingshan slid his hand across his neck, but the zombie Daoist was actually still conscious. He raised his bloodied head and looked at Little N. "It's you, it's you." Perhaps it was a flash of inspiration right before his death, but he was absolutely certain that the person who had taken away all the corpses in the pit was her. She definitely was not an ordinary child. She was a monster even more terrifying than the iron plate corpse. The voice came to a halt. The iron plate corpse extended his right index finger, and his long, metal claw slid across the zombie Daoist's neck. Blood gushed out, but the zombie Daoist was still alive. He stared straight at Little N. His many years as a Qi practitioner had bestowed him with an extremely powerful life force. The iron plate corpse bit down on his neck and drank to its heart's content, draining him dry. The zombie Daoist's blood surged through his body, transforming into new power. The zombie Daoist shriveled up completely, like a box of drinks that had been sucked dry. Hao Pingyang's eyes widened. He basically struggled to believe that the cunning and powerful zombie Daoist who had almost killed them would actually end his life like this. Although they were sworn enemies, he just felt like killing him would be a little more difficult. He would not do it in such a rather comical way. But in reality, when the weak faced the strong, they were like toys. In the face of absolute power, there was not even time for their blood to boil. There was only endless despair. Even death was so easy that it was almost laughable. Li Qingshan had experienced this once before, and he swore he would never experience it a second time. This willpower drove him to constantly grow stronger. As the three of them meditated, Li Qingshan patrolled around the zombie Daoist dwelling. The dwelling had been carved out of the natural cavern, separated into many rooms. The stone room with the sarcophagus was only one of them. There was a bedroom, complete with all the necessary decorations. It was not just a simple stone table or stool. There was also a kitchen, complete with a stove and kitchenware. As it seemed, even the zombie Daoist liked to eat cooked food. In the darkness underground, he lived quite comfortably. The remaining rooms were all rooms for refining corpses. They were filled with corpses that were either waiting to be refined or half-refined. There were over 100 of them, all of which were turned into flames by little Anne. The pale flames of bone smelting returned the white bone fluid to her hand, merging it with the other bone fluid before being constantly refined by the pale flames. Li Qingshan knew that she was refining a second skull prayer bead. She had benefited quite a lot from the mission this time as well. She had devoured several hundred zombies. Zhuozhibwa and the Black Wolf Guards were equivalent to several hundred ordinary people. She had refined them all, which greatly benefited her cultivation of the path of white bone and great beauty. With the experience from the first time, in addition to the great increase in her own strength, the refinement this time was extremely fast. In an instant, the bone liquid solidified and turned into a perfectly round prayer bead. Together with the other skull prayer bead, they hovered and danced in the palm of her hand. She now had another spirit artifact that she could control. The skull prayer beads were far more agile and powerful than regular mid-grade spiritual artifacts. Regular Qi practitioners would only use a single flying sword or blade. If they split their attention, their strength would plummet, so they would be better off focusing on a single weapon instead. Unless it was a set of spiritual artifacts, but sets of spiritual artifacts were extremely rare, and they were not necessarily easy to control. Every single prayer bead was connected to little Anne's heart. They were basically clones of her, making them extremely nimble. Only when she gathered the minimum of 14 prayer beads would she be able to refine the skull prayer beads of the lowest grade. They were powerful enough to overwhelm Qi practitioners. With the path of white bone and great beauty, a high-level ability beyond the 9 heavens, the greater little Anne's cultivation grew, the greater her strength would grow. Right now, she could easily crush cultivators of the same level. Once she reached a higher realm of cultivation, she might even be able to surpass the limits of cultivation and kill powerful enemies. Li Qingshan rubbed little Anne's hair. I really can't feel proud when I see you. The ox demon's fist of great strength, the tiger demon's fist of bone forging, and the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression were all extremely powerful abilities. Li Qingshan's strength grew very rapidly when he practiced the 3 cultivation methods at the same time, but he just felt like they were slightly inferior to the path of white bone and great beauty. Little Anne pressed her cheek against the back of his hand, trying to comfort him. Li Qingshan pinched her smooth, young cheek and smiled. I have to continue working hard too. I can't let you surpass me. Let's go. With the abundant rewards this time, his strength would definitely grow by leaps and bounds. He wanted to open the Sumeru ring a little sooner and see just what oxen had left for him, even though he had already vaguely anticipated this. The two of them returned the way they came. Hao Pingyang and the others had already retrieved their 100 treasures pouches. They had finished resting with the spiritual stones and pills inside. Hao Pingyang said, I can't thank you with mere words. If you ever need my help in the future, you only need to let me know. I won't hesitate even if I have to climb mountains of blades or swim through seas of fire. Li Qingshan said, You're too polite, Brother Hao. We agreed on this in the first place. It's just a pity that I couldn't get there sooner, or Hao Pingyang's face darkened and he sighed heavily. As the leader of the mission this time, he felt very guilty over the deaths of Jin Yuan and Jin Bao. However, if Jin Yuan and Jin Bao had not fled in the face of danger, they would have been able to wait for Li Qingshan to save them even if the zombie Daoist had captured them. Li Qingshan said, My condolences, Senior Brother Hao. After all, there's no such thing as absolute safety when carrying out a mission. You've already done your best. Hao Pingyang passed 100 treasures pouch to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan said, That's the zombie Daoist's 100 treasures pouch. Ever since he saw what was in Zhuozhibwa's 100 treasures pouch, he became extremely eager for the zombie Daoist's 100 treasures pouch. He was also a 6th layer Qi practitioner, so he should not be too shabby, right? Please distribute it, Brother Hao. Hao Pingyang took out a few books from his 100 treasures pouch before passing the 100 treasures pouch to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan said in surprise, What's this? Surely the zombie Daoist could not be so poor. Hao Pingyang explained, Originally, everything in the 100 treasures pouch should belong to you, but our mission is to obtain a cultivation method for refining and nurturing corpses so that our masters and seniors can use it as reference. As a result, I'll be taking these books. If you need them, Qingshan, I can make a copy for you when we get out. There are still quite a lot of things in there, but I haven't looked through them in detail. As he said that, he passed the 100 treasures pouch back to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan turned him down. I don't need this corpse refining technique. As for the other items, just 30% will do. Hao Pingyang said, there's no need for that. If you don't want it, then you're looking down on me. Defeating the zombie Daoist this time was basically all thanks to Li Qingshan. Fortunately, he managed to stay alive, so how was he supposed to split it with Li Qingshan now? Zhang Lanqing also said, Qingshan, just accept it. This is what you deserve. He sure wanted to say something, but he lowered his head again. He was afraid to say anything. He had been utterly humiliated. He had lost all his dignity. Now, Hao Pingyang and Zhang Lanqing basically treated him like he was invisible. They did not ask for his opinion at all. He felt both wronged and resentful. Li Qingshan said, all right. If that's the case, then I won't hold back. Hao Pingyang eased up slightly. Let's go. He stowed the corpses of the Jin brothers into his 100 treasures pouch so that he could take them back to his hometown for burial. Li Qingshan stowed the zombie Daoist's corpse away. That was worth several thousand qi-gathering pills. However, the iron plate corpse could not be stowed away in his 100 treasures pouch, and it looked far too terrifying. As a result, he found the straw cape and bamboo hat and covered it with it, following behind them. They boarded the boat and returned the way they came, going upstream. Although it was not as hair-raising as when they first arrived, the atmosphere was much heavier. Hao Pingyang, Zhang Lanqing, and Zhang Lanqing all had their own thoughts. None of them were in the mood to joke around. Only the flowing water rippled in the darkness, chanting endlessly. Li Qingshan leaned against the side of the boat and admired the scenery in the cavern, but he struggled to calm down. He felt warmth in his arms. Little and leaned against him silently. Li Qingshan smiled at her and stroked her soft, curly hair gently. He sniffed the faint fragrance of sandalwood from her body and gradually calmed down. At this moment, a speck of light suddenly appeared in the endless darkness. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.